What is the horrific bloody story of the first Sith Holocron? Greetings Acolytes and welcome back to the archives. At first glance, Holocrons are just data storage devices for the Jedi and Sith. But when we take a deeper look into their making and their history, you quickly learn that they are far more. Able to tap into their respective sides of the Force, some Holocrons have been known to influence the very events of history around them. This rings especially true for the Holocrons constructed by the Sith, which have a tendency to manipulate many and use them to attain the goals of the Holocron's long-dead master. In today's video, we are going to be looking at the history of the first Sith Holocron that was ever created in the lore, and how it survived for almost 30,000 years, leaving a trail of carnage and madness in its wake. Our story begins in the ancient days of 28,000 BBY on the world of Korriban. This day was known as the Reign of the Axe, the time when King Adis had managed to subjugate the warring tribes of the Sith purebloods under one leader. The sands of Korriban were always stained with the blood of the native Sith people, due to their constant warlike nature from being steeped in the dark side for centuries. King Adis was a Sith like no other, one who was born with coal-black skin instead of the typical red skin of the Sith. Adis was noted for being several times larger than his kin, and wielded two massive force-imbued axes, which gave the name to this era. Adis crushed every one of his rivals with sheer might alone, and used his strength to forcefully unite all of the Sith tribes under the axe. No one could challenge Adis, and anyone who did had their blood soup drank out of their skull after being defeated by the king. His unchallenged rule would last for a staggering 300 years, until the arrival of the dark side Rakatan species. The Rakata, who had now built what is known as the Infinite Empire, impressed and intimidated the powerful Sith race. The Rakata didn't immediately try to conquer them though, like they had other worlds, and instead attempted to forge a false friendship with King Adis in order to get him to lower his guard. In doing so, they traded their special knowledge of the ability to create the Holocron. But King Adis was no fool and saw right through this scheme, but he happily accepted their gifts of knowledge and would create a Holocron of his own. King Adis imprinted all of his ancient knowledge of Sith practices, including rituals and powerful magic. This kind of dark side knowledge is precious and extremely difficult to come by, especially in the later years of the lore. The ancient Sith had a way with dark side sorcery which no other era was able to match. No other being in the future could ever figure it out, unless they had this Holocron or scrolls like it. With the new technology that the Sith got from the Rakata, the Sith would also relocate their homeworld to Ziost and designated Korriban as their tomb world, a place to leave the old Sith masters. On Ziost, King Adis would continue learning the ways of the dark side in a more advanced way than ever before, pouring all of his new knowledge into his Holocron. But eventually, the king would decide to stop playing games with the Rakata as he gathered his armies in order to launch a preemptive strike. The battle was long and vicious, with King Adis himself cutting down hundreds, if not thousands of Rakatan warriors himself. Soon, the Empire realized that the Sith were far more trouble than they were worth, and they decided to retreat. This is significant, as this would mark the first major defeat of the Rakatan Empire, a piece of the lore that is massively significant, as this is essentially the first major victory of the Sith against another race, and a story where the Sith are essentially the good guys. The victorious Sith would celebrate, but King Adis himself would die shortly after the battle, sustaining far too many injuries from the onslaught. His memory, though, would be carried by the Sith people for generations, spawning the legend of the Sith Ari, essentially the Sith Chosen One prophecy. But as far as his Holocron, its story has only now just begun. We wouldn't see or hear from the Adis Holocron until the year 5000 BBY. After thousands of years, the Holocron was found in the possession of a Lord Garu. During the Great Hyperspace War, Lord Garu would either lose or surrender the Holocron on the planet of Ashas Ri, just moments before his death when the Sith Empire would collapse. Another 600 years would pass until 4400 BBY, when one Friedan Nad would set out from the Jedi Order to become the next Lord of the Sith, declaring that he would become a Sith if he could not be a Jedi Master, and that he would one day have his revenge by becoming the most powerful Sith sorcerer the galaxy had ever seen. This led Friedan Nad to fly his ship into the heart of the old Sith Empire, where he would follow the dark side into finding the Holocron of King Adis on the world of Ashas Ri. Here, he he was unable to open the holocron at first due to not knowing anything of the dark side, and the holocron deemed him unworthy. Friedenad would search for any surviving members of the Sith species, but would find nothing but rumors of Naga Sadow's survival. One Sith. Traveling to Yavin 4, Friedenad would locate Naga Sadow and would beg him for training. Sadow approved of Friedenad becoming his protege and the inheritor of his knowledge, so he took the fallen Jedi as an official apprentice. Friedenad would gain much knowledge from Sadow until he declared his intention to become the next sole Dark Lord of the Sith. However, Sadow ended his training after this, stating that only one could be the sole Dark Lord, and currently that was Naga Sadow. However, Frieden had grown exceptionally powerful by this point, and killed Naga Sadow by sheer brute force alone. Following this, Frieden began to learn the rest of what he needed from King Adis's holocron, who finally deemed him worthy. He gained so much power, in fact, that he would eventually conquer the world of Onderon all by himself, and Frieden would accomplish his goal of becoming one of the greatest Sith sorcerers in galactic history. Not the best, as he had intended though. However, Frieden did end up learning how to retain his spirit after death, binding his consciousness to his sarcophagus, as he could continue ruling Onderon through proxy kings and queens that learned from his dark side teachings. One of these apprentices was Queen Amanoa, who, with her husband, Amen, worshipped the deceased Sith Lord. She would be the next one who would come to possess the holocron of King Adis, as she believed that she had learned all that she needed from it, but likely did not find everything. One thing that is apparent about the Adis holocron is its gatekeeper was quite unique from other Sith holocrons. For those who don't know, the gatekeeper of a holocron is a holographic version of the person or persons who created it. It acts as a guide, teacher, or even a guardian to the knowledge within. It isn't the actual spirit of the person, but a coded recreation of their personality and their knowledge. Many Sith holocron gatekeepers tend to become jealous of the students learning from them, and so these gatekeepers were very treacherous. But the King Adis holocron gatekeeper was unique, as he could manifest himself without someone initially opening the holocron. The gatekeeper could outright deny someone knowledge, and even known to make threats to their lives. Because of this, we do not believe that this Sith Queen learned everything from the holocron of Adis, as she would have been much more powerful, and it is clear that the knowledge was held from her. Eventually, the Witch Queen would pass the holocron to her own apprentice by the name of Novar, who was said to use it to train other dark acolytes in the Iziz kingdom. Novar brought the holocron to his students and declared that he had brought the initiates to learn the ways of the Force. But upon hearing this, an image of Adis appeared before all of them. Novar told Adis that the initiates were ready to learn the secrets that he held, but Adis was unconvinced that they were worthy, and instead deemed them all weak. Novar insisted that the students were the best of their ranks, and that they had earned the right to learn the Sith way. Adis, though, after lengthy deliberation, complied, although he promised to take out his rage on Novar if any of the students failed. Although Novar was very uncertain about this arrangement, he took the responsibility of their failure upon himself, and during the Friedenad uprising of the year 3998 BBY, Novar and all of the Dark Acolytes would fail King Adis, not being able to prevent the Jedi from stopping the plan of the Sith, leaving behind more trails of blood in the thousands of year history of the holocron. Novar and all of his students would be murdered by the blades of the Jedi during the Second Battle of Iziz, and this meant that the Gatekeeper would not be able to enact his revenge as he pleased. When it was all over though, the Jedi took the holocron and decided to put it in a place where it would never be seen or cause trouble again, on a world known as Kodai. They placed it beneath a geyser and had it buried with millions of tons of water. There, it would rest for the next several thousand years, and it wouldn't be until the year 39 BBY when the holocron was found again. Finally, the holocron would be found again by one Professor Morklundi, a Chimerian darkside historian from Coruscant who was an expert in all things holocron. The man was a genius in his field and was known for being an excellent speaker. He authored the Lundi series, a collection of texts all about the Sith, which at the time was used by everyone, including the Jedi Order, for research. But in order to achieve this acclaim, Lundi had to make sacrifices. He would make contact with the dark side and dark side cults in order to gain information, and although he was highly respected in the academic field, he was in circles that he did not belong. Soon, rumors would surface that Lundi was dealing in Sith artifacts, and so this landed him on the Jedi Order's radar. They would then dispatch one Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi to attend one of Lundi's lectures and assess the situation. It was there that they learned that the reputation of Lundi, being a gifted speaker and academic, were indeed very accurate, and his knowledge of the Sith artifacts and holocrons was shocking. So impressive, as there was precious little knowledge on them. But the Jedi also discovered something else. Lundi was a Sith sympathizer, stating during one of his lectures that the Sith were stronger than the Jedi, saying that vengeance was stronger than peace. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan decided to then tail the professor, now having him under full suspicion, which would prove to be accurate. Lundi, following an ancient text of instructions, would travel to the world of Kodai in search of the Adis Holocron, finding its burial spot, and now uncovered the seabed. Lundi dug up the holocron and held it within his bare hands. But that would be when he was confronted by two of his old students who had followed him. One was named Norval, who had become power hungry and desired the holocron. The other was named Omal, who had come to stop Norval. The three of them then entered a brief skirmish, with each clawing for the holocron of Adis. During the battle, Lundi lost the holocron when it went tumbling down a dark chasm. The two students fled from the scene right as the Jedi, Qui-Gon, and Kenobi arrived, as they searched through the Force for the missing professor, only to find him near a dark side energy deep within the chasm. He had lost his mind and was screaming for the holocron. The water level was now starting to rise again, and the two Jedi went in and dug the Chimerian historian out of the chasm. However, he fought back, trying to fight them while cursing Kenobi until they were forced to subdue him. Back on Coruscant, Mork Lundi was put on trial, where he would confess to having malicious intentions with the holocron, but now he was fully out of his mind and confined to a mental institution. 10 years would pass in 29 BBY, as the Jedi heard rumors of someone attempting to find the holocron again. Now anxious to get the holocron before the newly risen Sith, they dispatched Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, asking the help of Professor Lundi to locate the holocron. Finding him in the hospital, Lundi was still suffering in the shadows of insanity, cursing Kenobi every chance that he got. The Jedi were able to get Lundi's help though, once he realized that he had a new chance to get the holocron. However, they had to keep him in a cage most of their journey, ensuring that he did not hurt himself or others. Over the course of their journey, they also noticed that the professor was deteriorating physically. His health was getting worse and worse, and it hadn't just been his mind that was poisoned by the dark side. After failing to retrieve the holocron of the world, they realized that Norval, Lundi's old student, had gotten it and was taking it to a dealer on Plu 2, where he was fetching a high price for its knowledge. Little did the Jedi know that this mysterious benefactor was, of course, Darth Sidious. Finally arriving on the planet, Obi-Wan would duel Norval, who was claiming to be a Sith Lord, but of course, he was only a pretender and a fanatic. Easily defeating him, Obi-Wan was able to claim the holocron at last, the Jedi finally getting it. But when Kenobi returned to the ship, he found Anakin comforting the dying professor, the man finally succumbing to the dark side. In his final moments, the professor expressed regret for ever attempting to claim the holocron, and in this moment, we got to see why normal beings should never interact with Sith artifacts. In the end, Kenobi would bring the holocron to Jocasta Nu, who kept it locked deep within the archives. However, for an unknown reason, the Jedi Council would not keep the Adis holocron in the temple, but instead sent it to the Jedi-affiliated house Pelagius, an extensive holocron collection in the Topani sector, and there it would continue to wait. In 19 BBY though, the carnage of King Adis continued, with the coming of the Great Jedi Purge. An individual by the name of Neville, who was a part of the Macrossa Order, would eventually recover the holocron from the house. For context, the Macrossa Order was a dark side cult that were created sometime during Exar Kun's reign. They had a network of spies and assassins that served one of the other houses of the Topani sector. They took advantage of the chaos of Order 66 and claimed the holocron for themselves, before attempting to destroy the rest of the holocrons before Palpatine and the Empire could get their hands on them. For a very long time, the Macrosa Order was in possession of the Holocron, before it finally traded hands with them for the final time in 4 ABY. The revived Macrosa Order would be willing to surrender the Holocron of Adis to the Sith Lady Lumaya. According to all of our resources, it is unknown whether or not Lumaya had this Holocron in her possession at the time of her death in 40 ABY, meaning the current whereabouts of the Holocron of Sith Adis are currently unknown, which, historically speaking, could only have extremely sinister implications. But that is the end of it, currently in the timeline. And that, my friends, is the horrific journey of the first Sith Holocron. The artifact almost feels like a character in and of itself. The fact that it is still at large is almost as if a serial killer is on the loose, ready to lie in wait for another many years before it pounces again to wreak havoc on an innocent galaxy. It traveled through so many places, traded so many hands, so many insignificant and significant people had it. It has eluded destruction and the weak, those that want the knowledge, or to destroy it. But the most perplexing part of the entire story is the handling of the Holocron at the hands of the Jedi Council, who would not allow it to stay in the temple. It's possible that the gatekeeper of King Adis was more than we all realized. Perhaps King Adis himself inhabits the Holocron, manipulates even Jedi into doing his bidding, so that his Holocron remains unharmed and on the move. Unlike most Sith Holocrons, the Adis Holocron was never in the hands of the Jedi for very long. It always returned to the hands of the Sith in time, meaning that the artifact certainly has an insidious will of its own, making it, as I'm sure you all have thought throughout the course of this video, very similar to the One Ring of Sauron from Lord of the Rings. But anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on the Holocron and its dark influence? What are your thoughts on King Adis? And do you believe that his spirit is in the Holocron somewhere deep? If you watched to the end of this video, I thank you immensely, and as always, your support means the absolute world. May the Force be with you always, and I hope you're having a great day.